楽しい楽しい。
Magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with the will. Magic in Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley. The world of Toaru is defined by two sides and two power systems, magic and science, magicians and espers. I believe due to the presentation utilised in the Index and Railgun anime, it is the common perception that the scientific powers are completely logical, and it is the superior power system writing-wise. But those of us who have read the Index light novel know this is a common misconception. It was, in fact, the author Kamachi Kazuma's intention to write the magic power system in a way that it feels like a science, and the Esper powers to look more like a fantasy despite being based off real-world science. The reason why the magical abilities feel so shallow in the anime is because it lacked the exposition you get in a novel format, where you get a substantial description to explain how the magic actually functions. Magic is the more complex power system, as there are many more ways in which magic can be used in comparison to Esper powers. Index utilises a very hard magic system, since Kamachi goes to great lengths to give magic a complicated set of laws in which it functions. Now, I will do my best to explain how magic works in a relatively concise manner. If you want more detail on how magic works, I recommend reading the Index light novels or the Toaru wiki pages on it, as I won't be able to cover everything in this video. Before we start, if you want to see me do a video on Esper powers and Espers generally, how they work, if we get to 3,000 subscribers on the channel, I'll release that video for you guys, so please sub if you haven't already for more Index and Railgun content. Let's get started. It is currently unknown how magic started or was first created, so I will discuss the basis from which magic likely originally came from. Magic can be manifested from four natural sources. First, there are ley lines within the planet Earth itself. The best way I can describe ley lines is comparing it to the Earth's plates and the many fault lines of the Earth that cause earthquakes and volcanoes. There are several ley lines that connect to landmarks and other natural formations on Earth, which act as a pipeline connecting different locations on the planet to one another. In the modern day, Vatican City is directly under a ley line and is connected to the French city of Avignon. Ley lines store magical energy known as mana, which is necessary to be able to cast spells and manifest magical power. Since ley lines use the power of the earth itself, using ley lines as a magical source is very powerful. Most notably, grimoires, which are magical books, are almost indestructible by conventional methods, draw their power from the ley lines of the earth. This is achieved by a magician who ties the magical energy from the ley line to the book to create the grimoire. Mana is also produced by all living things, even if they do not know how to use magic. And this natural mana does not affect espers, as usually when an esper uses magic, they suffer internal damage, as the two power systems are normally incompatible. Only by casting a spell do they receive the negative consequences. Mana can also be manifested from things called phases. What are phases, you ask? They are basically layers of reality that cover the universe that are essentially universes in their own right. As these layers of reality overlap in the Index universe we all know and love, power can be drawn from entities within these phases. Phases are created by magic gods, beings who have mastered magic that input magical power into the phases so that even regular magicians can utilize it. As each magic god usually represents a mythology or religion, this can also affect the phases they create. For example, heaven and hell from the Christian faith are phases in Index. Some phases, like the ones I mentioned, contain magical entities like angels and demons, which can be summoned to another phase under the right conditions. The other magic source worth mentioning is the laws of the world, also known as the four elements: fire, water, wind, and earth. Insert avatar reference here. These elements are linked to the fundamental laws of the world that all magic powers are based on. Drawing power from these elements means that a magician can utilize them in their magic. Most notably, the four archangels of Christianity each represent one of the elements. Michael aligned with fire, Gabriel aligned with water, Raphael aligned with earth, and Uriel aligned with wind. Now, I know what you're thinking. What the fuck am I talking about? This is just a bunch of convoluted nonsense, but don't worry, we have gotten the primary power sources for magic out the way. Now I can start explaining how this energy is manifested and transformed into the magic we see in the series. Vast majority of magic in the series is used via a concept known as idol theory. And no, this isn't the worship of Japanese pop stars. Idol theory is essentially borrowing the power of a magical source on the macro level and applying a portion of it on a micro scale. I'll use an example to explain this more clearly. Let's say I wanted to have the power of Longinus, aka the Spear of Destiny, that pierced Christ and killed him. I would have to create an imitation spear or objects that symbolize the spear or the stabbing of Christ, maybe to do with a Roman soldier, since that's the one who used the spear, or I could use symbols of the cross since Jesus was crucified. By experimenting and studying what works to channel the magical power, I can use a portion of the power in the object I am crafting. By infusing the object with mana, I have successfully created a spiritual item. This is where the science of magic comes into practice. It's not as simple as wanting to copy God and becoming a god-like being via idol theory. As with idol theory, you can only borrow a portion of the power, and if the power source is really strong, you need to use the correct knowledge, skill, and tools to be able to use magic effectively. Now, you're probably wondering, where does the original get its power from? Well, these originals often come from the basis of religions, legends, and myths, and if you remember, the main primary power sources from earlier, such as the ley lines, biological mana, phases, and elements, they come from one of these. Also, magic gods, the beings who mastered magic, who were once human and had to die to obtain such godly power, each represent a set of beliefs or a religion. Okay, I'll be talking about a spoiler from Indexed New Testament, so if you haven't read past the anime, click to this timestamp in the video and you'll be able to skip past this. Ophinus, who is the magic god of Norse mythology and is Odin in the Index universe, therefore the Norse myths and phases likely originate from Ophinus, therefore by putting her power into the world, that means other Norse magicians can use idol theory to channel power from those myths and legends. But considering Ophinus is so goddamn old, you can't really put a number to her age, like it would be billions of billions. But how did she become a god before all the legends even existed? Well, there might have been legends that outdated her, or mastered magic via the use of the power sources I mentioned earlier. But as I said at the start of the video, we don't know how exactly magic first started. Idol theory is the opposite of personal reality used by espers, but interestingly use the concept of the macro and micro, but in reverse this time. The esper has their own unique personal reality inside the subconscious mind, in which they can apply this effect to the world around them and warp reality as a result, creating their power upon the physical world. The mind of the esper observes the world around them, and that represents the micro, and the power generated in the world by the esper power represents the macro. While espers apply their unique individual power to macro, magicians use an existing macro power source to use their power on a micro level. As such, espers can traditionally only use one esper power, as their personal reality is simply one power source. while magicians with skill can utilize a variety of power sources and thus wield many powers. It all depends how much they study and practice. This was why gemstones, aka the natural espers, were seen as the beings with natural talent, while magicians were the ones without talent but had to study in order to be able to compete and match gemstones in their supernatural abilities. Now, is it becoming clearer that magic is more of a science and esper powers are more like magic? Now that I have explained the core of magic, I now want to talk about 3 important and common magical concepts or things we run into in Index. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about every magic concept in the series, as we would be here all day, and the Index Wiki will do a better job than me at explaining every single detail. So the main 3 concepts that are pretty important to the story are saints, telesma, and grimoires. First, saints. Saints are a natural cause of idol theory. Basically, they are the result of magic happening with no spells or magicians causing it. While there are very skilled magicians that can turn themselves into saints or give themselves saint-like attributes, traditionally you have to be born a saint to be one. Because their body shares similarities to the Son of God, their actual physical body is connected to Christ via idol theory, and thus they gain a portion of his power. Apparently Jesus in the Index verse is pretty fucking buff, since saints can casually destroy mountains with their strength. Next, telesma. Telesma is essentially the manner which Christian angels use. It is notoriously very hard to control, as it is distinct from other mana and is very powerful. As such, only very skilled and experienced magicians can use small portions of telesma, but if a regular magician tried to use a vast amount of telesma, they wouldn't be able to control it and will likely explode. Which is why saints are able to use telesma, as they are closer to the Son of God and are more divine in nature. Most notably, a ball of telesma created by Fiamma of the Right was going to nuke the entirety of Europe and Asia, if not for Accelerator stopping it in his white-winged form, which puts into perspective how strong telesma is. The members of God's Right Seat use telesma for their magic, as they have all purified their original sin, making them more divine so they can use angel-class magic. The only downside of having this power is that they can't use ordinary human spells, which don't utilize telesma, except for Aqua, who has an ability that ignores this rule, called Divine Mother's Mercy. Lastly, grimoires. I briefly touched upon these magical books earlier, but I'll expand on them a little bit more. So as you know, grimoires get their magical power from the Earth's ley lines, but they are also toxic for anyone to read. There are ways to bypass the effect and transfer the knowledge onto the reader without any negative consequences. The most notable example is the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, who is unaffected by the toxic consequence due to her perfect memory. Therefore, she is essentially a walking library who can recite any of the magical knowledge of 103,000 grimoires. I hope this video was informative and wasn't too hard to understand, but then again, the magic is really complicated in this franchise, but that's what makes it really interesting to me to talk about. Thank you for watching, and please sub if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.